Good evening, everyone. The meeting will come to order. Madam Clerk, would you please read the adequate notice of compliance statement?
Just a moment. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by the City Clerk's office in preparation of the open meeting notice dated July 1st, 2020, which was properly distributed and posted per statutory requirements.
Thank you. And now roll call, please.
Mr. Bowman.
Here.
Ms. Hairston.
Here.
Ms. Little.
Here.
Mr. Naidu.
Here.
Mr. O'Sullivan.
Here.
Mr. Vartan.
Present.
President Fox.
Here. Okay. So now it's time for the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone would please stand. And we'll all do it together. I pledge allegiance
I pledge allegiance
To the flag
to the flag
of the United States
of America
and to the
to the republic
for which it
for which it
stands,
stands,
one nation,
under
under God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Now, Madam Clerk, could you please read the notice regarding closed session hearings and comments?
Closed session meeting is authorized by state statute, was announced and held prior to the start of this meeting, and the known items for discussion were listed on the published closed session agenda. Please be advised that council meetings are broadcast live on Comcast Channel 36 and Verizon Channel 30, and rebroadcast on Thursdays and Saturdays on Hometown TV on Comcast 36 and Verizon 33. This meeting is also streaming live through YouTube. To view this meeting via YouTube, please visit the city's website at cityofsummit.org and click on the YouTube icon at the bottom of the home page. While this council meeting is being broadcast live and members of the governing body are participating remotely, steps have been put in place to accommodate public input during this meeting through public notice dated July 1st, 2020, which provided information for those wishing to participate during public comment periods at this council meeting. Public comment will be permitted at specified times as outlined in the agenda. Please refrain from commenting until solicited by the council president. For those members of the public who wish to make a comment during a designated public comment period, please use the raise hand feature and you will be called upon by the council president. Unless you are using an electronic device to follow the meeting agenda or need it for professional emergency contact purposes, please turn it off. Thank you.
Thank you. Now on to minutes for approval. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of regular and closed session minutes of June 9th and June 23rd?
So moved.
Second.
And do I have a, okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Motion carries. So now we're moving on to reports. Our first report is from Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Council President. Good evening, everyone. By executive order from Governor Murphy, face coverings are now required in outdoor public spaces when social distancing is not practicable. There are exceptions for individuals 2 years of age and younger, or when eating and drinking at an outdoor dining establishment, or when wearing a mask that would inhibit health or safety. Many of us have been wearing masks already, and I encourage everyone to continue to do so. Mask wearing is the single best way to control the spread of coronavirus in our community. And let's be honest, no one likes it. I don't like wearing a mask. My glasses fog up like crazy. But it is, by all indicators, the best way to stop the spread. So please try to take advantage of this. Tomorrow is high school graduation. I am extremely pleased for the students and their families that state guidance has allowed for a delayed ceremony to happen. These seniors are graduating and heading off to college at a very challenging time, and I wish them all the best, knowing that they are prepared and ready for what lies ahead. Summit Public Schools shared an update earlier this week on progress in planning for the 2021 school year. While the ideal scenario is for students and teachers to return to classrooms on August 31st, I am confident that school leadership will implement a plan with the health and safety of our students as a priority. A survey has been sent to parents asking for notice of intent to send students back to school, and that survey is due on Friday. Once again, I'm talking about the census. If you have not already done so, please go to my2020census.gov and fill out the 2020 census tonight. In 2010, 75.5% of people in Summit responded to the census. Thus far, as of June 22nd, we have 73.8% response rate. That's not enough. It takes less than 5 minutes in total to complete it. And the goal of the census is to count every person living in the United States once, only once, and in the right place. Article 1, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution mandates that this population and housing count occur every 10 years. Census data guides how more than $675 billion of federal funding is distributed to states and communities each year. And we've all learned with the coronavirus crisis, the government's counting how many people they live here, and they think we've got 75% of what we really have based upon our 2010 census. So we need to be smart and try to talk to anyone you know. Make sure they're filling out the census. It truly takes 5 minutes. And then lastly, I now have office hours again in City Hall on Mondays from 10 to 12 and Wednesdays from 10:30 to 12:30, again, starting in the a.m. Evening hours may be scheduled by appointment. My next Meet the Mayor weekend event will be on Saturday, July 25th from 9:30 to 11:30 at Lyric Park on the corner of Beechwood Road and Bank Street. And I hope you'll stop by to say hello, share any thoughts and concerns you may have. And at any time, you can contact me by email, nradis@cityofsummit.org for a meeting, whatever's convenient for you. I understand, people can't always be in City Hall between 10 and 12 during the day. But I've learned over 4.5 years that people come when it's convenient for them. I'm always open. So send me an email and we can set up a schedule or a time or an appointment. So thank you very much. Hope to see you around town.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And now on to Michael Rogers for the City Administrator's report.
Thank you, Council President. Good evening, everyone. Just a few quick items. Estimated tax bills have been mailed to property owners in Summit and are due on August 1st. There is a 10-day grace period, and late fees will be assessed beginning August 11th. Changes to curbside recycling collection went into effect on July 1st and include the following. Please do not place recycling in plastic bags. The recycling contractor will not collect it. Plastics that can be recycled are numbers 1, 2, and 5. They can be commingled with glass and metal. Full recycling guidelines are available at cityofsummit.org/recycle. And then finally, fees for on-street parking in Summit, downtown Summit, or for parking in municipal lots and garages will be reinstated on Wednesday, July 15th. Options for contactless payments are available at cityofsummit.org/parking. And that's all I have for this evening, Council President. Thank you.
Thank you. Now on to the Council President's report. I have a few items. One, social distancing and gatherings. There have been a number of reports describing gatherings by teenagers where safe physical distancing guidelines have not been followed. If in close proximity to or at an outdoor party with someone that tested positive, the Westfield Regional Health Department would like to remind residents that they must self-isolate for 14 days, no exceptions. It is the most effective way to control the spread of virus in our community and to get ahead of any outbreaks. So I urge you to please follow the health department's guidelines and be responsible and, responsible to your whole community. Moving on, emergency rental assistance. The deadline to register for the state open enrollment for COVID-19 emergency rental assistance program is Friday, July 10th at 5 p.m. The program provides temporary rental assistance to low and moderate income households that have a substantial reduction in income or became unemployed due to COVID-19 pandemic. Applicants may be eligible for a maximum of up to 6 months emergency rental assistance. More information is available at nj.gov/labor. Finally, extended unemployment benefits. The New Jersey Department of Labor and Workforce Development is extending unemployment to New Jersey workers who have exhausted state and federal jobless benefits. The state extension kicks in after claimants exhaust up to 26 weeks of state employment plus 13 weeks of federal pandemic emergency employment compensation. The additional 20 weeks of benefits brings the maximum number of weeks an eligible claimant may receive in benefits at this time to 59 weeks. Claimants will be automatically enrolled into extended benefits as their federal extension ends. They do not need to contact an agent or reapply. And that's it for council president comments tonight. Now we're moving on to public comments. At this point in the meeting, members of the public have the opportunity to comment on any matter that is not on the agenda. So if there is anyone who'd like to make a comment about something not on the agenda tonight, please raise your hand and I will recognize you. Okay, the first person I see with a hand raised is Steve Spur. Go ahead, please state your name and address.
All right, thank you, Council President. This is Stephen Spur. I reside at 61 Woodland Avenue. Just real quick, I wanted to express my gratitude for the hard work of poll workers on Tuesday's election. These were truly unusual circumstances, with Summit seeing only actual 3 poll locations in operation. But each of the poll workers that I did get the opportunity to interact with in my capacity as a challenger really rose to the occasion and helped the number of Summit voters cast their ballot under, again, unusual circumstances. I also wanted to recognize the hard work of Rosemary Licketies, our wonderful clerk. I had a number of questions throughout the day, including some concerns about access to the high school polling location. And true to form, she was quick to act and reassured not just myself, but a number of voters, trying to express that constitutional right. So thank you, Rosemary, and thank you to the poll workers for your hard work on Tuesday.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Steve. And I heartily agree, Rosemary, for all the hard work that you've done. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any other comments from members of the public on matters not on the agenda? Okay, not seeing any hands, so we'll move on to ordinances. Ordinances for hearing. Madam Clerk, would you like to read the first ordinance, please?
Yes. Number 20-3213, bond ordinance appropriating $4,225,000 and authorizing the issuance of $4,023,000 bonds or notes of the city for various improvements or purposes authorized to be undertaken by the city of Summit, Union County, New Jersey.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councilmember Vartan, could you please introduce this ordinance for hearing?
Thank you, Council President. This ordinance is ID number 20-3213. So this ordinance appropriates $4,225,000 and authorizes bonds to be issued for $4,023,000 for capital improvement projects. This is the bond ordinance for the capital spending plan that includes things like road milling, paving, sidewalk installation, equipment and vehicle replacements, and other critical needs. As a reminder, this bond ordinance is not an authorization for spending. The council will still need to receive bids and vote on each project individually. The other important thing of note is that each of the department heads will continue to work with our grant writing team to identify and apply for grants that will help reduce these costs when we do ultimately approve them. I move to open the hearing on this ordinance.
Second.
All right, the hearing is now open. Are there any comments from members of council? Councilmember Bowman.
I just wanted to second what Councilman Vartan had said, and basically highlight the fact that we did bring this budget, the capital budget, down to $4.2 million, and I'd like to thank all the council members for that, and that we will continue to be most prudent in our spending of our capital dollars.
Thank you, Councilmember Bowman. I've been informed that this is actually the leanest capital budget we've had in over a decade. And we will, as we go along, evaluate each spending decision and make sure that it still makes sense in this environment. But it makes sense to have all of these in the capital budget and have them so they can be financed if it makes sense to move forward. So I appreciate all the hard work of our Capital Projects Committee and all the other council members and the Finance Committee as well, putting this all together. Are there any other comments from members of council? Any comments from, there is a comment from a member of the public. John Buscaino. Okay, let me unmute you. I think we're both.
That was a mistake. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. All right. So are there any other comments from members of the public? Any comments from members of council? Okay. With that, I will close this hearing and we'll move on to the next ordinance for hearing. Madam Clerk.
Yes, number 20-3214, ordinance providing for the improvement of the Broad Street parking garage in and by the city of Summit, Union County, New Jersey, parking utility, and appropriating $380,000 therefore from the parking utility capital improvement fund of the city.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councilmember Vartan, would you like to introduce this ordinance, please?
Thank you, Council President. This ordinance appropriates $380,000 from the Parking Utility Capital Improvement Fund to be used for essential repairs of the Broad Street East Garage. As a reminder, this money is not being borrowed. It's simply appropriated from the Parking Utilities Capital Improvement Fund. So I want to take a moment to explain how the Parking Utilities Capital Fund came about. Late in the 2000s, the state of New Jersey established a tax of 25 cents on each parking transaction. In conjunction with that decision, the city of Summit raised parking fees. Then the state subsequently repealed the tax. It was at that time that the parking authority and the city of Summit made a very wise decision, which is that they kept the parking fees the same. And then the 25 cents that would have been sent to the state was put into a fund for capital improvements. So this fund has been used several times and has lowered the amount of debt taken on by the parking authority on multiple occasions. So due to the pandemic, there are virtually no cars in the parking garage on a daily basis. That means we'll be able to do the work on this project during the week rather than on the weekends, which will save labor costs. So the exact amount saved will not be clear until we receive the bids, but we will update the rest of council at that time. Finally, the schedule is aggressive and it will go as follows. So the bidding will open on July 14th. Contract will be awarded at the next council meeting on July 28th. And then construction will be set to begin in mid-August. So I move to open the hearing on this ordinance.
Second.
Are there any comments from members of council?
Yes,
Okay.
I have a quick comment.
Councilmember O'Sullivan, go ahead.
Yes. I just want to commend our Parking Services Agency head, Rena McNanny, for her stewardship of this money and the set aside and in the way it's being appropriately used right now so that the city is not borrowing or looking to raise money to go out and improve this garage. This money is there and it is going to be used wisely.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Naidoo.
Thank you, Council President. I think from my perspective, I think there may be members of the public who are wondering, if they're watching, why are we spending money in a parking garage right now when it's not being utilized? And I think the answer from at least my perspective is that we have to look towards how this parking garage could be used in the future. And we need to have an evaluation done now, as Councilman Vartan pointed out, that when it is not being used, and which is an unusual set of circumstances, obviously, this would, in a normal course of a year, this could never happen. And so we would have a better sense of that parking garage, because What happens in Broad Street East has a relationship to what redevelopment we do in Broad Street West, and how that parking structure is and the condition that it is relevant to a longer term project for the city. And we can't forget, even though we're living through these unusual set of times, at some point in time, many of the things that we previously had in the city will return to where it was. And therefore, we need to plan for the future. And so I think that even though there may be some folks out there who are going, wait a second, do you really need a garage right now? The answer is we will need a garage in the future. We need to make sure that garage is functioning to where we need it to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Naidoo. Any other comments from members of council? Any comments from members of the public? Okay. All right. So hearing no comments, no additional comments, the hearing is closed, and we'll move on to finance number 3. Madam Clerk, could you read the title, please?
Yes. Number 20-3215, bond ordinance appropriating $710,000 and authorizing issuance of $710,000 in bonds or notes of the city for various sewer utility improvements or purposes authorized to be undertaken by the City of Summit, Union County, New Jersey.
Councilmember Vartan.
Thank you, Council President. So this ordinance appropriates and authorizes bonds to be issued in the amount of $710,000 for the sewer utility capital projects and equipment. As was the case with the general capital projects, any expenditure will need to be bid, brought before council, and approved on a case-by-case basis. I move to open the hearing on this ordinance.
Second.
Okay, the hearing is now open. Are there any comments from members of council? All right, seeing none, are there comments from members of the public on this topic? Okay, I'm going to declare this hearing closed, and we'll move on to finance number 4. Madam Clerk.
Number 20-3216, an ordinance to establish the 2020 salaries, wages, or compensations of and for the officers and employees of the City of Summit, Union County, New Jersey.
Councilmember Vartan.
Thank you, Council President. So this ordinance establishes the salaries of all union and non-union employees of the City of Summit. This is an ordinance that is introduced and passed every year once the municipal budget has been adopted. In the private sector, coworkers discussing salaries is very often discouraged and sometimes prohibited. Because of the secrecy, this means some companies pay employees doing the same job dramatically different salaries. So over time, this has allowed a gap to be created in what some are paid without any difference in qualifications. In the state of New Jersey, the exact salary of every employee at all levels of government are listed publicly. In Summit, the salary and wage plan with all municipal salaries, performance ratings, and corresponding salary increments is included in the packet for this council meeting and available in the city budget on the city website. This pay transparency is good for 2 reasons. First is that it allows the taxpayers to see how our dollars are being spent. The second is, of course, every employee of the city knows what they're being paid in comparison to other people in the city, but also other people doing their jobs in other towns as well. So I move to open the hearing on this ordinance.
Second.
Are there any comments from members of council? Councilmember Hairston.
Thank you, Council President Fox. I would just like to thank Administrator Rogers and the staff, the department heads for their hard work during this chaotic time, and how thoughtful the process was, and coming out with a good result for the city. And I just appreciate the effort that went into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Any other comments from members of council? Council Member Naidoo, is that a hand?
Yes, thank you, Council President. Just a question or a clarification to make sure that that we're all on the same page, at least I am. These salaries were considered when we did our budget a few weeks ago, correct? That this does not in any way impact the budget that we did. Is that right?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Correct.
Okay. Any other comments from members of council? Any comments from members of the public? Okay, seeing none, I'll declare this hearing closed and we'll move on to the first safety and health ordinance for hearing. Madam Clerk?
Number 20-3217, an ordinance amending Chapter 7 Traffic, Section 7-8 Parking, subsection 7-8.5 Parking Time Limited on Certain Streets, and subsection 7-8.7 Parking Prohibited at All Times on Certain Streets of the Code of the City of Summit.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councilmember Hairston, would you like to introduce this ordinance, please?
Thank you, Council President Fox. This ordinance was created in response to a petition received from the residents of Waldron Avenue. The residents stated that their roadway was too narrow and it was seen that there was an overabundance of vehicles parked all day on the roadway, making it impossible for them to exit their driveways, and it created a hazard. The main concern was accessibility for emergency vehicles. Our police department's traffic bureau does a daily monitoring, and they observed numerous vehicles parked on both sides. And it appeared that some commuters were actually, and shoppers were parking there as well. A petition requested for 2-hour parking from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. for every day of the week. And this is a change from the existing time, which was 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. The other part of the change of the street is that residents have agreed to have no parking at any time on the east side of the roadway. This ordinance, I am moving to open the hearing. I'm moving this ordinance for being for the hearing.
I second.
Are there any comments from members of council? Councilmember Little.
I just wanted to add that the mayor and Councilmember Hairston, myself, and some of the other city staff were in a meeting with some of the residents of Waldron, and also representatives from the Beacon Unitarian Church, which is on the corner there, and everyone was in agreement. First, we were concerned that maybe the Unitarian Church would have some objection. On the contrary, they were very much in favor of this proposal and agreed that they were absolutely in favor of anything that provided more safety for the residents and their neighbors, and helped with the parking issues that the church may cause for the residents in the area. So I did want to point that out, that they were also very much in favor of this ordinance. So I also would support it.
Thank you, Councilmember Little. Does anyone else, any other council members have any comments? Councilmember O'Sullivan. You're muted.
Thank you, Council President. I just, first of all, I want to congratulate the residents on the street for coming together like this to get something done for the greater good of their neighborhood. I just, with the extra hours now, and how is this going to be enforced? Is it going to put undue stress on enforcement?
I believe that's a question for our police chief.
Rita.
Oh, it's a.
Rita had her hand up.
I apologize. Go ahead, Rita.
No, what we can do is we can do a rotating shift, because it's starting at 7 and most of my officers don't start till 7:30. We can switch 1.5 hour a day. It's just till 7 p.m. The police will have to kick in later in the day and on Sundays, because we don't have any enforcement on Sundays. But I believe I can work that out with the chief.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any other comments from members of council? Any comments from members of the public on this topic? Yes. So the first one is Kimberly McCormick. And please state your name and your address.
Hi, can you hear me? This is Kimberly McCormick. I live at
Yes.
21 Waldron Avenue. I just wanted to say thank you to the safety committee of the town council, and thank you to Susan Hairston for helping us with this. It's been very important to us, and we were glad to be able to collaborate as a street and collaborate with the Beacon Unitarian Church to come up with this ordinance. So hopefully it goes through and makes the street more peaceful. It certainly has been very peaceful during the quarantine period. So we're hoping that the change in the signage will kind of maintain the safety and the peace that we've seen the last couple of months. That's all.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Next comment, Ann Marvin.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for bringing this up and getting it on the agenda tonight.
Can I just interrupt briefly? Could you please state your address for us?
12 Waldron.
Thank you. Go ahead now. I'm sorry.
I'm on the church side of the street. I think the police could attest to the fact that over the years we have called many times. At least 40, with our driveway blocked, with cars too close to the driveway so you can't get in and out even if it's not fully blocked. The street did become narrower when we did the Belgian block and repaving and drainage work. And so it is narrower. And if there's ever like snow or anything piled on the side of the street, that in combination with cars on both sides of the streets and cars too close to the driveway makes the situation almost impossible. So I'm hoping that something can be done to at least have the parking eliminated from one side of the street, because as you have attested, we have commuters, we have shoppers, everybody there for hours on end. One thing I do want to bring up and ask that it be considered is one of my concerns. I was not at the earlier meeting that some of you were at. One of my really big safety concerns is this. I'm on the west side of the street, and for the most part, anybody who parks on the west side of the street does so because they've come down Springfield Avenue, made a left onto Waldron, and made a K-turn into one of the first probably 4 or 5 driveways. And I think that's a very dangerous situation. When we had younger children, we were always putting recycling bins or something in the street because they come, off of Springfield. They haven't found a parking space yet. They zip down Waldron, they K-turn, so they're coming into a driveway, they're backing out. As I don't know if it's come up yet, but we have so many children on the street, so many young children. I personally think a K-turn is a very dangerous situation. That is eliminated if the parking is not on the church side of Waldron, if it's not on the west side and the parking is on the east side, because then people that come from Springfield and turn onto Waldron can park straight away without having to K-turn. So that's my only other point that I think should be taken into account, or I'm asking that it be taken into account in terms of safety, because I've just seen too many near misses with walkers, dogs, bikes, kids. It's just a very dangerous situation. And that's my comment. And I thank you again for taking the whole matter under consideration, because as a nearly 40-year resident on that street, it's crazy. And we call so often, and I know this, everybody's busy and the parking people are busy and the police, when they used to do it, were busy, but it just really affects the quality of life on the street. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Ms. Marvin. I'm going to turn that over. I'm going to ask Councilmember Hairston to address that issue about the east versus the west side of the street.
Yes, and I know that actually came up, and it was a recommendation from the police in terms of how safety is considered where you have crossing of the street. And so I think I'm going to ask Chief Bartolotti to address that, because I remember it was Chief Weck at the time, but we actually discussed it during the meeting, which side and why.
Okay. Chief Bartolotti, would you like to address this, please?
Councilwoman Hairston, excuse me, is correct. The study was done to look at the availability both of the safety aspect of vehicles coming and going from either direction on that street, the crossing within that street, the traffic with regard to the Unitarian Church, and also the number of spaces that would be afforded to the residents from one side versus the other. All of that cumulative study determined that the west side was the better choice for parking, with the east side being prohibited, would allow all of those factors the better opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from members of the public? Okay, seeing none, any other, oh, wait, there, Ms. Marvin, did you have your hand up again?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Just to say, I understand all those parameters that were taken into account. And I know there was a concern that people would be crossing the street at Springfield Avenue. And that was a reason for them to not have to cross that street. But I just want I want everyone to keep in mind that we have 50 K turns a day, which are serious, as opposed to an hour of street crossing at Springfield Avenue on a Sunday by the churchgoers. I know that churchgoers crossing the street was taken into account. I'm just saying, I think a chronic issue that maybe wasn't focused on was the K turning. So maybe when this is decided upon, that could be taken into account. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Chief Bartolotti.
Yeah, I could add to that. So typically what will happen, as will in this case, is that when if this ordinance does pass, it'll take some time to get the signage ordered and in place, especially with the backlog from COVID. But once those signs are deployed, there's also a period of traffic enforcement and familiarization that's also deployed, where we can address a lot of those concerns and see how motorists respond to that restriction on one side.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from members of the public? Any comments from members of council? So I'm going to declare this hearing closed, and we'll move on to safety and the second safety and health ordinance for hearing. Madam Clerk.
Number 20-3218, an ordinance amending the code, chapter 7, traffic, section 7-811.2, stop intersections designated.
Okay, so Councilmember Hairston.
Thank you, Council President Fox. This ordinance was created to reduce motor vehicle accidents and to enhance pedestrian safety at the intersection of Ashland Road and Tulip Street, Ashland Road and Maple Street, and Tulip Street and Prospect Avenue. The ordinance is to install stop signs on Ashland Road in both directions, east and west, at the intersection of Tulip Street and Maple Street. Tulip Street and Prospect Street will have stop signs installed on Prospect Street in both directions, east and west. This will create a new four-way stop intersection at each location. And I'd like to give a little background, because this is a topic that has created lots of interest. And so I want to just give a little history. In 2018, the engineering division of the city identified needs to streamline and develop a process for stop sign requests that were coming in from the public or were requested internally. A key element that the division wanted to clarify was that stop signs are not to calm traffic. They are a method to control speed. Stop signs are regulatory signs intended to be used to increase the safety of motorists and pedestrians. The division at that time put together a stop sign installation guide. It was presented to the Safety Committee in 2018, And at that time, the committee and the police department made some minor revisions to it, and the guidelines were accepted in May of 2018. Later on in 2020, more revisions were made in regards to schools. And so in April 2020, new guidelines for stop signs were issued and were available on the city's website. So another clarification I'd like to make is that these are stop signs are to control at intersections. The stop sign ordinances are governed by the Federal Highway Administration Manual and the Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So you may have heard of MUTCD. So we're actually going to be doing 3 ordinances. And I just want to give a little overview, and then I would like to open the hearing for this particular ordinance. But we are looking at stop sign installations for 5 separate locations, and they're proposed at Rose Wallace, as well as Cleveland Windsor, where a stop sign has been created, but is not warranted where an assumed stop condition exists. 3 locations are being considered for an always stop control, and that's this particular one that we're going to be opening up for hearing at Ashland and Tulip, Ashland and Maple, and Tulip and Prospect. I want everyone to be aware that the city didn't have any 4-way stops until 2016. And the first one that was installed on Pine Grove and Blackburn. Since then, 4 additional stop signs, 4-way stops, have been successfully installed. The ordinance that we're talking about today is for the intersection that is serviced by a flashing overhead light and stop control on Tulip only. This is the intersection of Prospect and Tulip. The committee at the time, this was first introduced in 2019. So we've been looking at this, or the safety committee, our traffic department and our engineering department have been looking at this for a while. And they expressed a desire to improve the safety at the intersection if it was warranted. And a study was conducted by Measure, our engineering firm that we've been using for 14 years. And the report for the engineering division is going to be given at this time by we'll first hear from our engineer, Aaron Schrager, and we will hear from, if he so deems, an expert from Measure. And so, Council President, at this time, I would like to move to open the hearing on this ordinance. And but to move that and then have our engineer report right now.
Right, of course. So the motion has been made. We need a second.
Second.
Okay, so the hearing is now open, and we will call on Aaron Schrager, the city engineer, and ask him to please do a brief presentation on the process of how we make these decisions about stop signs and what was just the process for these stop signs particularly.
Thank you, Council President. I have a screen share we're trying to do. Madam Clerk, I'm having some trouble here. I could I could put the camera on my screen. I mean, it's not ideal, but
let me see if I can get it. Give me a second here.
But just in advance to clarify, so the first ordinance will be the all-way stop conditions at Ashland and Tulip, Ashland and Maple, and Tulip and Prospect. So that would be voted on collectively. And then the other 2 will be separate ordinances immediately following.
Just give me one moment. I think I have it.
No problem.
Can everyone see that?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, there you go. Aaron, if you tell me where you want to go, I'll.
Okay. And we could start just at the first one is just the title. Just to obviously stop signs are more than just a red octagon on the street. So they are defined as or identified as a traffic control device by the MUTCD. Within the MUTCD, they are classified as regulatory signs, and their definition is defined as to inform highway users of traffic laws or regulations and to indicate the applicability of legal requirements that would not otherwise be apparent. So if you could flip slides. Just the MUTCD is the manual on uniform traffic control devices. It's produced by the US DOT, the Federal Highway Administration, FHWA, no shortage of acronyms, and that governs traffic control devices, traffic markings, and sign installation in the United States. Obviously, with 50 states and other territories, there's a need to unify to make sure everything is at least similar, or not similar, identical throughout our land. So in addition to just stop signs, the MUTCD does go over the types of signs. So you could flip the screen. That's just some of them there. You flip the screen again, it discusses, placement, the height and the offsets of signs. If you could flip one more time, it goes over colors of signs. Each sign has a color for a reason. And additionally, in regards to signs, it talks about, letter height and visibility and reflectivity. So that's just some of the stuff in there. It's a 900-page manual for engineers and police departments to use. Moving ahead, in 2018, the stop sign installation guidelines were presented to and accepted by the safety committee with some revisions, and it was developed by the engineering division to proactively streamline the various rules, regulations, policies for stop sign installation, provide awareness on the use of stop signs, and to kind of reiterate that stop signs are not for speed reduction. And we do receive many requests for that purpose, but that is not the intent that is spelled out in the MUTCD. Moving ahead there, so the decision, which we have now, at least for these first three, is an all-way stop condition. The decision to install multi-way stop control should be based on an engineering study. So, and within there, it defines what criteria to be considered, which includes crash history, vehicular volume, pedestrian and bicycle volume, speed, turning movement control, pedestrian vehicular conflict, sight distance, street classification, school walking routes are some of them. A stop sign does require an ordinance to be approved to authorize its installation, which is what's being acted upon tonight. Once adopted, the signs can then be installed and the striping added in conformance with the MUTCD. And then just a little history on these, which the council member Hairston went over earlier. There was the first one in Pine Grove and Blackburn, was going on 4 years now. The 4 additional that have been installed are listed: Whitridge, Hobart, Whitridge, Essex, Hobart, Springfield, and Maple and Oakland. There's 3 installations being proposed tonight, and then there's also 3 additional that are being investigated. So that's just a little outline on stop signs and how we proceed. Typically, requests can come in through email, through the web, through internal staff, through committees, through in person, through phone. So, and then we proceed following the guidelines we created to assess whether it's needed and go through the safety committee. And that's how we've gotten here tonight.
Thank you, Aaron. I think it would be helpful if you could take us through the thinking on the 3 that are the 3 stop sign or 3 intersections that are part of this ordinance for hearing. So the two Ashland intersections and the Tulip and Prospect intersection. If you could just take us through quickly what the thinking was on those.
Yeah, so it started 2019 at the safety committee at that time. All three of those intersections came up through resident complaints through the police chief at that time for those to be investigated. Now, two of the three intersections being considered do have a flashing signal overhead, and that's Tulip and Prospect and Maple and Ashland. We do not have a history of when they went in, and typically those would go in as an added measure for an intersection that is either nearing or might have even have met the warrants for a signal, or it might have had a significant crash at some point. Unfortunately, we weren't able to find something. So it does highlight that clearly at some point there was, at least those two, a need was identified to increase the safety at that intersection. The third one is right next to Brayton School, which has a very high vehicular and pedestrian traffic count at the peak hours, particularly in school days. But some of these, as well as Maple, has a lot of people do walk to the train station. So it's not just your school hours. There are some accidents there, and I know some may say, well, it's not significant, but anything more than zero is something to be considered. I know Prospect and Tulip does have significant sight distance issues, as well as the fact that technically Tulip is the primary road and Prospect is the secondary, and the stop signs are actually flipped in that situation. So once they were identified through through the safety committee, when we investigated them, we realized they did meet the warrants for an all-way stop condition. We've had success in the past, and that's how we've brought them before you tonight.
Can you, Aaron, can you explain when you say that they meet the warrants? Can you explain what that process is? My understanding is there criteria that you work with and in making a decision. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's a little bit broad. It was on an earlier slide, but some of it is engineering judgment. Some of it is pedestrian quantity. The ones here that I don't believe, well, the three of them didn't meet, is relative to average volume at the intersection for a set 8 hours. So you do have to do traffic counts. Like I said, sight distance is one. High pedestrian vehicular conflicts is another. Crash history would be one. Though we had some crashes at all three, none meet the instant warrant to proceed. But those are items you would look at. So these all met one or more warrant to justify the installation for the engineering study.
And is it correct that you don't have to meet all of those criteria, that even one of those criteria is sufficient?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Are there any questions from members of council on this topic? Councilmember Bowman.
Thank you. Thank you, Council President. I have a couple of them. My first question is on the prior intersections that we installed the four-ways. Did they meet the guidelines that we're discussing tonight with accidents and volume? Do you remember, City Engineer?
They met some warrants. I would have to look up specifically which ones they met. I don't want to be held to it, but I know Blackburn and Pine Grove had significant crash history. So I'm not sure if they met the other, which other warrants they might have met. So.
And if I may continue, I guess I have two more. The one goes to the Prospect Tulip intersection. How exactly do we decide what is the minor and major? Because my observation is Prospect is nothing more than a pass through without any reasons to stop from Pine Grove the whole way to Morris Avenue. And I'm just personally surprised that is considered the minor and that Tulip is considered the major.
So for this instance, it's actually the NJDOT classifies some roads, not all of them within the city. So they identified Tulip and Ashland for that as a major collector. and they identify Prospect as a local municipal road. So they've identified that, and also volume comes into play too. So Tulip does have a higher volume. So, but for this purpose here, it's the NJDOT classification.
And the final question is, with the installation of four-way stop signs, does idling and traffic start to back up? And is that taken into consideration when a engineering study is performed? In particular, well, all three intersections that we're discussing, I think I'm interested in.
It can be, and it has been. I know, and Mazer can speak to it later. They did a level of service study. It's not required for a all-way stop condition, but what you find a lot of times is, yes, there is now stopping and some idling, but you'll have reduced stopping and idling on the intersection with the lesser travel, with the lesser volume of cars. So yes, there is some, but it does reduce throughout the whole intersection. So that would be the best I can answer it.
Okay. Councilmember Vartan.
Thank you, Council President. So I have a few questions for Mr. Schrager, but I want to say first that I was chair of the Safety Committee in 2019, and I remember that we, as a committee, sought to prioritize and identify any areas around town where pedestrian and traffic safety should be improved, and that as a result of the thorough and deliberate process, we're now almost a year later from when the conversation was started, and we're going to be potentially taking action now. So I just wanted to clarify a few questions for the rest of council and the people that might be watching. So as to the existing four-way stops, did they achieve the desired effect?
Yes. So I could say for the four of them we have. I don't like to get into numbers too much, but we did have accident reductions at, for sure at Hobart and Springfield and Blackburn and Pine Grove. And I think those have been well received and worked very well. So.
Okay. And then can you just tell us when the traffic study was conducted that resulted in the report that we all have from Mazer?
Yes, I'd have to look there because they were out. And I should just note, because the date of the report is July 2nd, but they had come out, and I see a date of December 5th here when the traffic studies were done. But they originally sent a draft report over in February for review, which I had told them, don't finalize it until it goes to safety, and it went to the safety committee. We approved it. Then the virus hit and it was just forgotten. So as this now came back up, I realized they never finalized it. So the date there it really was a February draft that's just dated July 2nd.
Right, but what I'm getting at is that it's based on traffic from when school was in session and before the virus, and when people were.
It was pre-virus, what we refer to as normal conditions. So non-holiday school days.
Perfect. And I think that though we don't know what commuting will look like tomorrow or next week, it's likely that we will return to those normal conditions at some point, and we would like to be ready for that. The third and final question that I have for you was, is consideration given, or was consideration given, to the possibility that people will funnel onto streets or more minor streets that don't have the stop signs in order to continue their path, and will that cause traffic issues for other streets now? So I guess that's a couple different questions.
It was considered, and it's possible, but less likely when you look at the layout of the streets in the area. Especially so, people avoiding Ashland might go to Mountain Avenue, which is an arterial road. So that would almost be what the roadway system is intent for. So that would actually be a victory if they do. I don't think you'll have too much of that. And even jumping over to Prospect, when you look at how the roads work, anytime they might save avoiding the stop signs will probably just be lost in the longer route traveled, as well as additional stop signs throughout those cut throughs. So the layout of these three relative to the city grid is not really conducive for people to just go to a parallel street and to proceed to a beat the stopping that they would have to do.
Understood. Thank you.
Any other, Council Member Naidoo?
Thank you, Council President. And through you, I have two questions
Mm-hmm.
for the city engineer. The first is with regard to the residents who live near the proposed installation of stop signs. Is there some type of notification process that's given to those folks? And if so, what kind of information is shared with them with regard to the underlying rationale for coming up with the proposal as given? That's the first question.
Okay. So typically for regulatory sign installation within city streets that doesn't have a direct impact to private property, which is different from say curb or sidewalk or trees. There is no additional notification given to those property owners on the corners. We haven't in the past. It's definitely something we could consider. I don't know if it would, if that's something we'd want to pursue. For this one, when residents did reach out, we did send the studies and information we have to them for their review. So, but in brief, no, there's no process in place to notify people adjacent to a stop sign installation.
Okay, and the second question is and another process in a way question, I guess, or maybe it's just, there's three different stop signs being considered. Was there thought given in your analysis of sequencing and seeing the impact of one would have on the other and so forth, how they would work out?
It wasn't considered, at any significance that it was looked into. The Tulip one was originally proposed last year, so some of it was just timing that they happened to catch up together. We feel the Tulip and Prospect one and Ashland ones will, they are independent of one another, though they are parallel streets. And the Ashland ones together were just, that was what we decided to proceed at once. So.
Are there any other comments from members of council? Councilmember, Mayor Radis. You're muted.
Hit your space bar, Mayor.
I got it. You think after how many months I would have figured this out? Anyway, my understanding, Mr. Schrager, is that as an engineer, you are bound to meet these warrants. And if you do not, and you sign off on something, you are susceptible to losing your engineering license. Is that correct?
There is a liability when you certify signs and perform a study for justifying the installation of signs. So could it be a license loss? No, it would go before the board who would decide, it could be a suspension, fine, or and it depends on severity. So obviously the misuse or lack of use of something could lead to something more significant and a more significant, punishment or penalty.
So this is not just something that you can decide on your own. You have to work within certain parameters.
That is correct, yes.
Thank you.
Any other comments from members of council? Councilmember Vartan.
So just one other quick process note from me. So there were two different things when looking at the documents related to this. So there was the Mazer report, and then there was also the stop sign request, which I guess is like a memo. And I think that is a pretty helpful document because it frames it in the way that is basically, here are our 8 things that would justify a stop sign, and it meets these and it doesn't meet these. So, I think just moving forward, in anticipation that we may want more stop signs at some point, I think that format made available to the public earlier at the introduction of the ordinance would be a good thing in the future. That's the only other comment I would have. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments from members of council? Okay, so I'll open it up for members of the public. I see Andrea Mullen has her hand up. And please state your name and your address before you comment.
Hi, this is Brian Mullen, Andrea Mullen's husband. We live at 79 Tulip Street on the corner of Tulip and Ashland and Summit. I would just like to begin by thanking the members of council for their time tonight, more broadly for all the hard work you all are doing to help our community safely begin to get back to normal here in light of COVID. I'm speaking tonight in regards to the proposed implementation of four-way stops at the corners of Tulip and Ashland and Maple and Ashland. For a variety of reasons, I am opposed to the installation of four-way stop signs on these corners. For the sake of brevity, I will just address a few high-level reasons right now, but I am available to elaborate on several additional considerations, and I am prepared to follow up with a more in-depth letter with additional supporting evidence if necessary. For the record, I have read and reviewed the stop sign installation guidelines that have been referenced by council members, which was issued by the City of Summit's Division of Engineering in 2018. I have also read and reviewed the study that the town had recently commissioned with Measure. It was completed on July 2nd. To begin, when you read these studies and the standards, there are two overarching and glaring items that emerge from the Measure study that directly conflict with the MUTCD standards on installing four-way stop signs, at least in my interpretation. You know, objectively, these two items alone should be reason enough for the council to seriously question this proposal, specifically, again, the stop signs on Ashland. Specifically, the MUTCD standards essentially suggest that a four-way stop sign is potentially justified in instances where there are 5 or more accidents at an intersection over a 12-month period. The Measure study commissioned by the town very clearly shows that on the corner of Tulip and Ashland, over the 3-year period spanning 2016 to 2018, there was 1 accident and no fatalities. So based on the standards say there should have been more than 15 accidents or more on this corner over the 3-year time period for a four-way stop sign to get serious consideration from the City of Summit, and there was literally 1, and that's in the Measure study. If anything, the fact that there's only been 1 accident at this intersection over a 3-year period speaks to just how well the intersection currently functions. And I would suggest that the council thinks long and hard about any unintended consequences of changing something that doesn't need changing here, particularly in light of the fact that there is an elementary school on the corner, which I will get into a little bit later. While the lack of accidents should be reason enough to question the installation of four-way stop signs on the corner of Tulip and Ashland, and I would probably argue on Ashland and Maple as well, there are additional objective reasons to question this proposal, vote against it, that emerge from the Measure study, and despite the Measure study's conclusion that the proposal is justified. Specifically, the guidelines also suggest that an engineering study consider the volume of traffic at the intersection and the traffic delay at each approach of the intersection when considering if the implementation of a four-way stop is justified. So basically, the standards outline clear metrics that are supposed to be met or exceeded, so more volume or more delays or both, for at least 8 hours on an average day in order to potentially justify considering a four-way stop sign at the intersection. There are metrics that can be measured that pertain to the volume of vehicles and pedestrians that use the intersection, and there are additional metrics that pertain to the length of delays that cars typically experience at the intersection. And so the Measure study measured all this, and so when you read the study, as it pertains to the volume component, i.e. how many cars and pedestrians use the intersection, it is very curious to see that the Measure study seems to choose a 7-hour window for the corner of Tulip and Ashland and a 6-hour window for the corner of Maple and Ashland, when the standards say it needs to be at least 8 hours on average. That is why it is curious to see, that the volume metrics are not exceeded for 8 hours or more. But regardless, in the Measure study, the volume metrics for the intersections don't meet or exceed the standard for when a four-way stop sign should be implemented over an 8-hour period. It's not my opinion, but it's objectively true when you read the study. Furthermore, as it pertains to delays at the intersection, the standard essentially suggests if there is a 30-second or more delay on average at any of the approaches at the intersection, during the AM or PM peak periods, a four-way stop sign might be justified. In the Mazur study, it very clearly shows that literally no approach on the corner of Tulip and Ashland, either in the AM peak period or the PM peak period, exceeds a 30-second delay. Once again, I would say that the fact that this corner does not exceed the delays as outlined by the standards to warrant a four-way stop, even with an elementary school on the corner, is actually further evidence of just how well the intersection is currently functioning as is. Finally, while not addressed in the consultant study, installing a four-way stop on the corner of Ashland and Tulip specifically has the potential to create daily havoc at the intersection 9 months of the year during the Brayton School drop-off and pickup periods. While this is a little more subjective, it is no less important, and the council should consider this dynamic very thoroughly and thoughtfully because there is serious potential for unintended consequences here as well. In light of all the above and big picture, it is unclear to me why the town is pursuing the installation of four-way stop signs after reviewing the study from Mazur Consulting. I'm curious to hear what exactly is the town hoping to accomplish. I might sound a little fired up. I'm not. What are you guys hoping to accomplish? It just said in the PowerPoint stop signs don't solve for speeding. And the Mazur study says that accidents aren't really an issue on either intersection. It's just unclear to me what the objective is here. And in my opinion, until that can be clearly articulated and backed up by the data, it seems irresponsible for the council to approve this measure, in my opinion. Thank you for listening to me. I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Mullen. Mr. Schrager, would you like to address those comments and explain what the rationale is for, I guess we're talking about the Tulip and Ashland intersection?
Yes, I believe he's referring to the Ashland intersection. So, and if I could, Madam Clerk, we have Michelle Brehoff from Mazur Consulting is here. If we could let her in to speak on the report that was completed. But in brief, I know some of the concerns raised are relative to warrants that are not, being utilized to justify it, but I can let her speak further to that. I see she's in now, so if she's free, I'll let her have the floor.
Mr. Schrager, can I just clarify something here? When you say warrants that are not justified, so there are 8 different criteria or warrants, you don't need all 8 of them. So what Mr. Mullen has talked about is 4 of them that are not satisfied, but there are 4 others that are. Is that what you're saying?
Well, for that instance, Mazur,
for that intersection,
and they could speak to it. They're not saying that it's the accident that's justifying an all-way stop control, because then you would be closer to the 15 or so accidents required to meet that. So that's correct. There is only 1 or so that are included. So that's not used as the warrant. Michelle can speak to that further, but that's not one of the warrants there. They're using another warrant in that instance. So.
Okay. So Michelle, would you like to address these issues?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Just for the benefit, my name is Michelle Breihoff. I'm a traffic engineer at Mazur Consulting. I am the manager of the traffic planning group, and I did oversee the report that was submitted. I do want to take a minute just to take a few steps back and just kind of explain the methodology for the report that we prepared. So as you'll see throughout the report, we did do a data collection back in December when conditions were quote unquote normal. With that data, we did go through, the peak hours that were satisfied. And as Mr. Mullen, I believe, noted, we specifically in the tables noted where the peak hour volumes exceeded over 300 vehicles on the major street, which is Ashland Road. And that was what we actually tabulated. So Mr. Mullen was correct in the fact that we satisfied 7 hours for Ashland and Tulip, and then 6 hours for Ashland and Maple, because, we did not satisfy the volume warrant, so to speak. We did also collect the crash data from the police department. And again, Mr. Mullen is correct in the fact that, both intersections experienced either 1 for Ashland Road and Tulip Street or 3 accidents for Ashland Road and Maple Street. So again, we weren't instantly triggering that accident warrant for these intersections. We did do a capacity analysis of the intersections. So we showed the comparison with the two-way stop control that's currently in place. We found that the northbound and southbound approaches of both Tulip Street and Maple Street operated at levels of service D, around level service D, as in David. With the implementation of the all-way stop control, we found that those approaches actually operated better, just because it allowed better gaps for both streams of traffic at those intersections. So it kind of balanced out the volumes and the delays at the intersection. What we did look for these two intersections specifically is that the additional METC consideration is the need to control vehicular and pedestrian conflicts near locations that generate high pedestrian volumes, which is in section 2B-07 of the METCD. And we felt that since the intersections were in close proximity to the Brayton School, that these intersections would warrant all-way stop control from this approach. So that was, the kind of the summary of our report. Again, our report is for those two intersections. So it's Ashland and Tulip and Ashland and Maple. We did not look at the third intersection that was mentioned prior. So this report is just for those two intersections, and those were our findings. So again, we warranted the installation of the stop control based on the proximity to the school and not necessarily the volume or the crashes at those intersections.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Are there any questions from members of council on that? Okay. So I think with that, Councilmember Hairston.
Thank you, Council President Fox. May I ask the representative, Michelle, to advise when would she make the recommendation that a stop sign, a four-way stop, is not warranted? Can she let us know what signs she would find in her study that would tell us it is a bad idea or it's not necessary to do that?
Sure. So if we were to do the capacity analysis, as I previously mentioned, and find that any of the approaches were to be significantly degraded in levels of service and delay by the installation of a two-way stop control, we would not make that recommendation. If we found that, it was an area that when we went to look for these warrants and we found that they weren't satisfied, if it was an area that, really wasn't a candidate as far as school crossings or other safety considerations, then we might not suggest the implementation if we found that those warrants were not satisfied. But since we are, within the proximity to the school and we feel that it's a safety enhancement and a benefit to those students and to the crossings in that area, we felt that this was an appropriate location.
Thank you. Any other comments from members of council or questions for Ms. Bryhoff? Okay, so
I have some thoughts actually, Marjorie, but I would prefer to wait after the public.
Okay, so why don't we, Ms. Bryhoff, can you hang on in case there are more questions about the study, please? And I'll take the next comment from our a member of the public. Thank you. Okay, so I've got Robert Burns. This is interesting. We need to promote him to a panelist.
I don't think we do.
Okay, can someone unmute Mr. Burns, please?
I think for this moment, we might have to. I
Okay.
don't see any other option.
It's not letting me allow him to talk either.
Okay, Council President, may I allow them to be promoted?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so Mr. Burns, you're in now. If you could state your name and address, please.
Do we
Mr.
unmute?
Burns? He doesn't appear to be muted.
No. Okay, I'll remove him from.
Okay, so we'll try again later with him. Let's go on to our next. We have a few other comments. Okay, so next is Christopher Harrison. Please.
Hello, I'm Christopher Harrison. I live at 41 Ashland Road. I am for the stop signs. I've lived on Ashland Road for over 20 years and have seen many accidents at both of the intersections on Ashland Road at Tulip Street and at Maple Street. And they're pretty serious accidents. Cars get thrown onto the sidewalks. It's a danger. I think even one accident is too many accidents. And it's not just Brayton School that we're nearby. There's also the middle school, and there's Oak Knoll School, and Memorial Field. A lot of pedestrian traffic happens around this area. And I think having those four-way stop signs will increase the safety for everyone, pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists. I think that the other four-way stops around the city have been successful. I've never been in a large traffic jam at any of those other stop signs. And Summit is a really walkable city. Adding these signs, I think, will really help promote that walkability and enhance the safety of everyone around here. And thank you very much for doing the study and working to keep us all safe.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. All right, so moving on, we have a comment from Patrick Morada. Oh, it looks like we have to promote him too. Should we do it? See what happens? Okay. Mr. Morada, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Please
Very
state your name and address.
Thank you. Patrick Morada at 127 Maple Street. I'm at the northwest corner of Ashland and Maple. I was a little surprised to hear that this has been, these four-way stop signs have been discussed for over a year or about a year now. We've only recently become aware of them and have taken a crash course in vehicle traffic and Summit regulations and the MUT guidelines. You know what I'm talking about there. Before I continue with my comments, I was just wondering, by combining all three stop signs into four-way stops into one ordinance, is it required to pass all of them, or are they individually allowed to be implemented?
We would have to reintroduce the ordinance if we were to consider one without the others.
Okay, thank you. And then we took the liberty of emailing maybe more full comments to the city clerk and others in advance for distribution. Didn't want to surprise anybody. And I think for this call and just for the rest of the public, maybe to just summarize a couple points in that. We are not in favor of the
address. Did you say your address?
He did. Yeah, we got it.
We are not in favor of the four-way stop proposed at Ashland and Maple. In reviewing the study from Mazer Consulting, we saw similar inconsistencies and where the data didn't necessarily support the stop. We also reviewed the City of Summit stop sign installation guidelines and believe that a lot of the discussion from at least what's been made available in public from the safety committee or safety council relates to speeding. And speeding, I think, needs to be addressed a different way in a minute. The primary objection is that our family is going to be subject to greater noise and exhaust pollution as a result of every car having to stop and accelerate on Ashland 24 hours a day throughout the year. Significantly more vehicles will stack up and idle along both Maple and Ashland throughout the day. We understand that the request to make this change came from the safety committee. Nobody approached us. I know we've lived here for 8 years, and we can point to and look at both the data presented in the study about 3 accidents over not only the last 3 years, but I believe it's less than 4 accidents in all 8 years. So instead of using fact or reason to justify the 4-way stops, it appears that the study is pointing to more nebulous and qualitative need to control conflicts as a justification. And the study does not go into what those needs are or identify the conflicts. While Brayton School appears to be used as the driving reason for the 4-way stops at the intersections, the school is, or those intersections are served by cross guards at the peak times, and the crossing guards stop the traffic. They effectively stop all 4 directions of traffic, and that I think since the peak really happens at that time, you're really trying to now manage other than the peak, which seems to be a burden on the community. The level of service, well, we don't have to go into the detail on traffic flow, really, because that's already been addressed earlier by the other comments. The same with the volume. I mean, the volume is really only there around 2 hours a day, morning and evening. We noted in reviewing the study that no mention of articulated vehicles was really brought up, and looking at the traffic data and the tables in the back of the report, it was almost, I would consider, an abnormally low level of articulated vehicle traffic. Likely, in my opinion, that it's because the study was conducted and data was taken during December, and there are few, if any, landscaper trailers. Landscapers are a common sight in Summit, as we all know, and for 3 seasons, they are often making that major right turn from the southbound Maple onto eastbound Ashland. If there was a stop sign on eastbound Ashland, or the stop sign on westbound Ashland, they would, those trailers would be face to face with those stopped cars. So I see a significant backup opportunity on Maple as waiting for the Ashland traffic to dissipate. It's also
Mr. Morada, I'm going to ask you to wrap up, because we are trying to keep people to 3 minutes, and there are a number of others waiting to comment.
Okay. So
thank you.
That applies to the New Jersey transit buses and Oakville school buses. And then I think just the last comment is the 4-way stops have driven changed and modified behavior. I know I now, with the addition of the Maple and Oakland stop sign, I now travel on Oakland instead of staying to more major roads as I go towards the center of town. So I don't believe that the unintended consequences are as minor as discussed earlier. So.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Moving on, we've got Lorraine Boyer.
Hi, my name is Lorraine Boyer at 52 Ashland Road. And I, like Brian Mullen, on the corner of Ashland and Tulip. So he and I have a lot of similar comments and thoughts. I will make it brief. I will first thank everybody for working on this issue. This corner has been a difficult corner. I agree. I've lived here for 24 years, and I've probably called 911 30 times myself in the first half of those years living here. But ever since you put the rumble bumps in on Tulip Street, it has made a significant difference in accidents. I also am opposed to having a stop sign, at least on this corner. I'm definitely opposed to putting up both of the stop signs on Ashland and Tulip and Maple and Ashland at the same time. because I think that there could be a significant backup on Ashland Road from Tulip Street to Maple Street at certain hours of the day. I think I have a question to, I guess, Aaron Schrager and the company that did the study. I would like to know if the hours that they did the study included the hours of 3 to 4 p.m. on a school day, because that would really matter, because the traffic, I think the traffic would get backed up tremendously. And it also would cause a conflict between a stop sign and the crossing guard. Which one takes precedence? And after sitting at a stop sign, a four-way stop, for a significant period of time while children cross the road, how do you know who goes next? Because you can't always remember, you won't always know who came to the stop sign first. So I think that'll cause a little bit of confusion. And the other thing that I wanted to know is, did they take into account, with the backup in traffic on both Ashland and Tulip Street, the driveways that would be affected, because there are parked cars because of the school around drop-off times and pickup times. There's parked cars, so cars will have to be going around the parked cars. Then you have stops, cars stopped on both sides of the road. And I think it'll be a significant barrier to the driveways on Tulip and Ashland, both. So the last thing, I just agree with the other neighbors who are opposed to the stop signs, that the information gained from the study does not necessarily support the stop signs. And just lastly, I really think it's important, if we're going to do this, to do one stop sign at a time and see how it goes before you do both. That's it. And thank you.
I did it too. Okay, thank you, Ms. Boyer. So I'm going to allow Mr. Schrager and Ms. Freihoff to respond to that.
I'll let Michelle speak to the actual study, if you could.
Sure. So just to respond to the peak hours that were analyzed, we collected data again on December 5th. The time frame that we counted was from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. and then 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Specifically to try to capture the school dismissal. I think I got muted by accident, maybe. Did everybody hear me right then? Okay. When we looked at the timeframes that we counted, we established the AM peak as well as the PM peak. The established peak hours that we have are 7:30 to 8:30 a.m. and then 2:45 to 3:45 p.m. So that is in line with what I'm hearing as in regards to the operations of the school adjacent. So those were the time periods that we actually analyzed when we did the capacity analysis for the intersection. So the findings that we have in our report are specifically for those time periods. Does that answer the question?
Yes, I believe it does. Okay, so thank you. So we'll move on to the next question. John Buscaino.
Hi, it's actually Kim Buscaino. We live at 126 Maple Street. And my question is really around the anticipated traffic. Since the four-way stop went in on Maple and Oakland, especially during rush hours in the middle of the day, you can see that the traffic backs up down Maple Street almost to Ashland. Oftentimes it's past Linden. And now when we institute two traffic four-way stops a block apart and in the same neighborhood, what do you anticipate the impact to be to the traffic in the neighborhood?
Okay, thank you for your comment. I will turn that back over to Ms. Freihoff.
Sure. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding the question correctly. Is that you feel like what will happen to the traffic adjacent to those intersections, and if people may take other routes as a result of it, or is that kind of what your concern is? I just want to make sure I'm understanding it.
So it's already played out that the four-way stop at Oakland and Maple causes traffic to back up on Maple Street during rush hour. And now when you add in another four-way stop on Maple and Ashland, which is 2 blocks away, plus the four-way stop on Tulip and Ashland, which is a block away, I want to know if you've looked at or anticipated what that impact would be, so that there's the potential to have traffic on Maple stacked from Ashland to Oakland both ways.
Gotcha, understand. So no, we have not looked at this as far as a corridor operation. I would anticipate that, you know, people may choose alternate routes as a result of just inconvenience factors, but that's not something we specifically quantitated in the report. So I do not have the answer to that, but, you know, I feel like then maybe the traffic in the area would just dissipate, you know, just more evenly throughout the street.
But I think a council member previously stated, or maybe the engineer stated, that it wasn't likely that that would happen because the alternate routes weren't really there. I think that given,
I think they may try, you know, people may try to do that originally and then find that it's not really, you know, any faster, or that it's maybe less convenient than taking the other route. So I would
know, but that gets us back to my point that we're all going to be sitting in traffic on Maple and Ashland and Tulip because we're all boxed into this these 3 corridors that have these 4-way stops. And I guess the impact of that isn't really, I can't really understand why we would go that route when the only warrant that we're addressing is that the corner is close to a school. There's no other traffic related reasons to have that situation.
Understood.
Mayor Radist. You're muted again.
I'm trying not to have the back feed. I think the 4-way stop at Oakland and Maple has been very effective. Would you agree?
I wouldn't have any way to measure that. My only comment is in the impact from traffic, and we've all learned to deal with that. But when you combine that with putting another 4-way stop 2 blocks away and then another 4-way stop a block away, I don't see how there's going to be any relief and how it wouldn't be horrendous for the children in the morning to make those crosses.
Okay, well, I guess I don't understand what you're saying, but I'll leave it to the engineer. I'm sorry.
Okay. Are there any other comments on this topic? And then we'll move on, I guess, to we'll try Robert Burns again. Okay, Mr. Burns, are you there? Hello?
I've allowed him in as a panelist, but for whatever reason, he has no audio. It could be on his end.
Yeah, it appears to be.
Oh.
Okay. All right, so I think, Mr. Burns, I don't think this is going to work. Oh, wait. Hello?
There's a phone number, 273-3965. If I believe they're able to speak if they can identify themselves. If you want to take that call, Madam President.
Yes, that's fine.
3965, did you want to speak? I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Yeah, this isn't working. Hello? Okay, I don't think this is going to work. So let's see, we have a couple of more comments. So let's move on, I think. So our next comment is wait, Cornell Choulet is gone. Are you still? Ms.
You want
Choulet?
to do Cornell?
Cornell Choulet? Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, you're on.
Yes, hi. I just wanted to make a quick comment. I live at 55 Prospect Street.
Are you there? Looks like you got muted somehow.
Yeah, I meant to unmute.
I unmuted?
You go ahead. Go ahead.
Hello, I live at 55 Prospect Street, which is one house in from the intersection of Tulip and Prospect. And I know the concerns that have been addressed by the public have really concentrated on the intersections of Tulip and Ashland and Tulip and Maple. And I understand there's a lot of questions about the datas and the surveys, and I'm just weighing in as a resident for the past 9 years on Prospect Street. I am very close to the Tulip intersection, but not on the Tulip intersection. And the cars race down and they race up the hill. And now in the post-COVID environment that we live in, the children are freely riding their bicycles in the middle of the street, oblivious to the intersection at Prospect and Tulip. It's a very confusing intersection. There are a lot of blind corners. It's flashing yellow as you go down and up Prospect, and it's a flashing red on Tulip. So I support the council and the safety commission's study on this. It's a very dangerous intersection. There have been accidents. I hope there are not more. I just would like to see the speed regulated. And I believe that what the Safety Commission is recommending is probably in the best interest of the community and the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Choulet. Let's see. So now we've got DBO. Could you state your name and your address?
Yes, hi, this is Deborah Oliver, and I live at 37 Tulip Street, which is the corner of Tulip and Prospect Street. I am the next door neighbor of Cornell, who just made a comment. So I want to speak to that intersection. And while I don't disagree with the comments that Cornell just made about the dangerous aspects of the intersection, by listening in so far and looking at least one of the studies, although I didn't see the Measure study, my question is if putting the four-way stop at Tulip and Prospect will have no effect on speeding, because generically stop signs, we're told, do not solve for speeding. And if the accidents at our intersection have not increased during the time that the study was undertaken, and I don't think they have compared to the 24 years that I've lived at this corner, then I guess my question is, why do we feel that putting the four-way stop is the best way to address what is most definitely a problem, which is speeding up and down Prospect Street, because it's a hill? And is there any other means by which the speeding would more appropriately be regulated? And then the last thing I would add is that, as Mr. Mullen and others have pointed out, there is a wonderful crossing guard at the intersection, during the school time hours. And so I feel that that problem is sort of separately addressed, not necessarily by stop signs. So my question is a stop sign the best way to address what is definitely a problem, which is speeding down and up the hill? Thank you.
So Mr. Schrager, I'm going to turn that over to you to answer that one.
Thank you, Council President. Yes, you are correct that the stop signs won't address speeding. It may have an impact one way or the other, so it will not address that. I will bring to the safety committee and meet with the police. Based on your concern, we'll look into additional speed studies to see, what possibly could be done there just for speeding. In regards to the intersection for the stop sign, there's a few conditions over at that intersection that exist that we would like to correct with this stop sign. The first that was mentioned earlier by Cornell was you have sight distance issues that are challenging at that intersection that are obscured or obstructed by telephone poles, traffic signals, items that we can't move, and they are present even though it is a right angle intersection. You do also have a very high volume of pedestrians and vehicles at the peak hours because of the school, which is another reason. You also do have, where we mentioned earlier, the stop sign is actually on, what I would think is the major street as opposed to the minor street. So this would correct that. And you also have the school, it is in a school zone, and then having spoken to that crossing guard, and she does a great job. She had also expressed a desire to have this because she felt it was a challenging intersection as well. So we did, when we observed traffic out there, we did, speak with her. So, and she does help, but she's not there all the time. And in the end, this is to protect the intersection at all hours. You also have that flashing beacon overhead there, which usually indicates at some point when that was installed, that intersection was identified as being more problematic than somewhere that has just a stop sign. So we didn't find the history as to why or when that happened, but that usually to me indicates that somewhere that's been looked at previously that is subject to additional improvements for safety.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. So yeah, if you could take into consideration what to do about the speeding, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. So it looks like, I don't know if the two people who have their hands up, they've both commented before, if those are additional comments or they just didn't put their hands down. Let's see. I'm sorry.
Do you want to take?
Right. I think the first
Mr.
one.
Mr. Mullen.
Sure. I think I just unmuted I unmuted Kim Buscana. So let's.
It's John Buscano now. So.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Madam President. So again, 126 Maple Street. We've been here 25 years, and one of the questions that came up to the city engineer was he didn't know how long the light was here. Being a resident of Summit for over 60 years, I don't remember when that light wasn't here. So just a little information there. I do know that things have changed dramatically since we moved trees from the street side of Ashland Road on my property, on the city's property line, and on the 127 Maple Street on Ashland side. So there's a better view around that corner now. So going from that light to removing those trees had significantly lowered the accident rate on our corner. The other thing was, and I just want to clarify, that the recommendation for four-way stops on both Tulip and Ashland and Maple and Ashland is solely because we're in a school zone. Is that correct?
I don't believe that is the sole reason. I believe there was also the conflict. It's also the conflict between pedestrians and motor vehicles. And honestly, I've been at that intersection and seen, I saw someone get hit at that intersection, a pedestrian at the Maple and Ashland intersection. A jogger got hit.
Yes.
So it's not.
And it's funny because I was there at that scene. I am a member of the Summit Rescue Squad as well.
Okay.
And I've been at the corners of pretty much almost all of those accidents that happened in the neighborhood. I do know that when we spoke about alternate routes going up to from Elm Street to Mountain Avenue would be a preferred rate, according to the city engineer. And I can tell you that that corner is much worse than the two corners that are in question. The other question I have is, if one of the recommendations is because of the school zone, would they be considering putting four-way stops, if not lights, at every intersection that's next to a school? In particular, High Street and Kent Place Boulevard. I mean, there's so many different areas in town. Elm Street in Oakland. I think it's kind of overkill. Again, this is my perception of what's going on in town and in the area, and I'm not for the four-way stop.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Buscaino. So we have, I guess, we've got Mr. Mullen again. Are you there?
I am. Thank you for the council's patience again. I know it's late, 79 Tulip. I just wanted to address something that Michelle from Measure said.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to keep it to under 3 minutes, please, okay?
No problem at all. Michelle from Measure said that she was referencing that for 1 hour on the AM on one of the approaches on Tulip, the grade was a D. I would like for her to clarify that D is below 30 seconds, whereas the standard is 30 seconds or above. So she can clarify that for the council. And then furthermore, I'm just wondering why, the Measure study does not incorporate school drop-off in any way. And I'm wondering if maybe after hearing all those comments, if that's not incomplete. And then finally, I'd just like to say, I understand why the city had the study done. I appreciate it. It's great. But for all the council members who have to vote, if you read it and compare it to the standards, it doesn't warrant the stop signs. And that's the bottom line. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Freihoff, can you respond to I thought it did include the drop-off times for the schools and the hours.
Yeah, so like I said, we counted, the hours that we counted were 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. and then from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. And that was a Thursday that we counted, so it was a typical school day. And the established peak hours that we found during those timeframes were 7:30 to 8:30 a.m. and then 2:45 to 3:45 p.m. So again, our peak hours that we analyzed were coincident with the school peaks.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. And I had one other question. There was a question about what would happen if with the two stop signs at the four-way stops at Maple and Ashland and Tulip and Ashland, and whether there would be sort of an additive effect with backing up of traffic. And I was not clear whether that had been considered.
Sure. So again, if we look at the always stop control levels of service and delays, we're finding levels of service B or better. We have one level of service C, which is actually a lower end of a C. And then if we look at the appendix of the report, there are actual queue calculations, and none of the anticipated queues extend through to the adjacent intersection. So we're finding from the analysis that we did that the queues would be not backing up into the adjacent intersection.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. All right, so I think that covers all of the questions from members of the public. Are there any other comments from members of council? Councilmember Naidu. You're muted. I think you're here. I'm unmuting you.
Press your
space. I said that I saw that the mayor had previously asked to speak, and so I'm going to defer first to her, and then I'll.
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't see.
No.
Okay.
My only comment is the following,
Beauty before age.
No, we're not even going to go there, Nora. We're not going to go there. Here's my thinking about this, and I heard all the residents and their concerns. and you, here's my feeling, and this is from my own professional background. We get studies, and in my own professional background, I deal with consultants who give studies, and there's modeling associated with it, and there's expectation of how it will turn out. And then, of course, when you actually get to the reality of what happens, sometimes what you model and you predict, regardless of how good it is, and that's not to cast aspersions on the work product, the best work product, there's always the uncertainties of what happens when you actually get the reality of it. And what we do here tonight is not something that is set in stone. And so what I would remind, at least from my perspective, right, I am sure as if we were to approve this, let's hypothetically assume, and let us hypothetically assume that the worst case scenarios that people who are concerned posit turn out to be true, then I am sure that the safety committee, the police department, the engineering department will reconsider what has been done, because nobody wants to have a situation that is either unsafe, that is causing problems for people, that is exacerbating a situation. So I think from my perspective, there is a study here. There are concerns about what needs to be done. Sometimes when people think that something cannot happen, like for instance, we put a four-way stop by the middle school. Initially, I will say, and I drive a carpool for my sons to the middle school. And initially, it was kind of problematic because there's a crossing guard and people had to figure out who goes first and everything. But after a while, people got used to it. And I think it did make it safer in that area for kids who were crossing and for cars that were coming there. But it takes a little bit of time. And we have to see, not every decision council makes on these types of issues is perfect. No, none of us are. And so we'll always have an opportunity to reevaluate what's going on. And so from my perspective, I think as long as people understand that this is not the be all and end all of any decision, that we could proceed in that manner. That was my thoughts.
Thank you, Councilmember Naidu. Mayor Radis, would you like to comment?
Yes, thank you. I'm actually going to be more like Councilmember Naidu than I normally ever am. The most important thing I feel I have to do as mayor is to make sure that the citizens of Summit are safe. And I've known that since I was first sworn in, but it has become incredibly apparent and clear, and what I think about from the time I get up to the time I go to bed in the last 4 months. So when we have these conversations about, and that's life and death stuff we've been dealing with for the last several months, and we will continue to deal with that for the next several months. When we talk about four-way stops, it's safety versus inconvenience. I drive down Prospect Street 10 times a day. If I have to stop for 10, 15, 20, 30 seconds because it's safer, that's what I have to do. Yes, we've got great crossing guards there. I cannot speak personally about the Ashland Road corners. I can speak very personally about the Prospect corner. And we have a great crossing guard there, but she's there twice a day for 45 minutes. We have a tremendous number of seniors who are walking, who now cannot do all kinds of things in this world of Corona. And they're walking, and they want to be walking safely. We have children that are riding their bikes, that some will be in school maybe in September, but others will be working remotely and out on their bikes. I just think, guys, we just got to figure this out. This is really a bigger issue than what's happening on your corner. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other comments from members of council? Councilmember Hairston.
I just wanted to, the mayor has put it so eloquently, so I won't repeat what she said about that, which is so profound for the safety committee, things that we're talking about. But I do want to absolutely thank Michelle Bryhoff for being here and for spending the time to help us understand. None of us are traffic experts, but she is, and her firm has done an incredible job for 14 years. I want to thank Aaron Schrager, who has really spent a lot of time talking to us about this and helping us understand impressions and what we experience really have little to do with expertise, and the commitment that he and Chief Bartolotti and the traffic division have to get this right over time if we don't get it right at this moment. And that's really repeating what David Naidu said. So Council President, I just wanted to reiterate that there is a difference between curbs and the safety aspect of it. We don't really require citizen buy-in for safety issues. And that's why we have those codes and we need the expertise. So that was just the point I wanted to make. When you give me the authority to move on to the next one, I just wanted to make sure that that was clear between stop signs and the other types of traffic ordinances that we deal with.
Thank you, Councilmember Hairston. Are there any other comments from members? Councilmember Vartan.
Thank you, Council President. I just want to very quickly summarize my thoughts on this. It is true as to the process. It's true that members of the neighborhood are not typically consulted when it relates to stop signs. Perhaps we should sometime in the future have a discussion about doing that. However, many people are obviously still aware that this proposed change was happening. By my count, more than 8 people have participated in this hearing, and more are watching and listening. Whereas in comparison, about a month ago, we had a hearing about the $50 million municipal operating budget, and only 1 member of the public participated. So my concern as a council is that we not put, too much faith in our staff and our experts on some topics, and no faith in our experts and our staff on other topics. I think that we have to put it in perspective here a little bit. And in summary, for this ordinance, I feel confident that people have had the opportunity to participate. These ordinances, to my mind, do meet the criteria. And as Councilmember Naidu said, we can always go back and fix it. So I'm going to support them because I believe that they're based in the best possible thing that government can be doing, which is keeping people safe. So that's my comments, and I thank you for the opportunity to give them.
Thank you, Councilmember Vartan. Anyone else have anything to add? Okay. Well, we've had a long discussion. I think this has been very helpful and enlightening. I think we've all learned a lot about how traffic engineering decisions are made, and I think Councilmember Hairston alluded to something, that there are a lot of decisions in this community that we do. We have community meetings, when we discuss sidewalks, when we discuss curbs, when we discuss road work and things like that, where we meet with members of the public. But, those are decisions where those are something different from safety measures that are not just, something that's going on in your front yard, but are for the community as a whole. And I think it's really important to think about the fact that we are a community, and the top priority should be, as Mayor Reyes said, protecting our community members, protecting their safety, both drivers and pedestrians. And, I think a lot of us in our experiences, as we were running for office and now as elected officials, the thing we hear most about is safety, pedestrian safety, safety of kids biking, safety of adults biking. It's one of the issues that I think we all hear the most about. And, you know, I understand that there is concern that perhaps people will sit in traffic a little bit longer, but on balance, I think the most important thing is to make sure that our community is safe. And for that reason, I support this as well. And I'm now, unless anyone else has anything to add, I'm going to call this hearing closed, and we're going to move on to the next ordinance for hearing. So with that, Madam Clerk, could you read the next ordinance, please? You're on mute.
Thank you. Number 20-3219, an ordinance amending the code, Chapter 7, Traffic, Section 7-11, through streets, stop intersections, and yield intersections, subsection 7-11.2, stop intersections designated.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councilmember Hairston.
Thank you, Council President. This ordinance is a result of paving of Wallace Road to meet the ADA requirements and to have barrier-free ramps installed at the intersection of Rose Lane and Wallace Road. Though a crosswalk lawfully existed at this location, it was not striped in an effort to.
Councilmember Hairston, I think you skipped ahead one.
2019?
19 is Cleveland and Windsor.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out which one it was. So.
Okay. So I'm so which one are we reading, Madam Clerk? I apologize.
3219 for Cleveland and Windsor.
Cleveland and Windsor. Thank you.
Sorry,
Apologies.
sorry to interrupt. It's Michelle Bryhoff again from Mazer. I'm assuming you guys don't need me for the rest of this?
That is, I believe that's correct. Yes. Mr. Schrager, nothing else, right?
No, nothing at this time. We're good.
Thank you so much.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate your time.
Have a great night. Thank you.
You too. Thank you. Okay. Are you ready, Councilmember Hairston?
Yes.
Okay, let's do it.
I apologize. This ordinance is in response to a C-click fix that was received that was requesting a stop sign be installed at the intersection of Cleveland Road and Windsor Road for safety reasons. And through the recommendation and study by our engineering department and the traffic safety, the traffic department, and the stop sign installation guidelines, the recommendation was made for this ordinance, and I move to open the hearing on this ordinance.
I second.
Okay, so with that, are there any comments from members of council? Okay, I'm not seeing any comments from members of the public. Okay, so I'm going to ask again if there are any comments from members of council. I think this is kind of in my neighborhood, and I think this is a great addition. I know there's a lot of confusion on this intersection. You know, people don't know who's got the right of way and who goes where. So I think this will add to the safety. And I commend the safety committee and the engineering department for doing this one. So if there are no other comments, I will close this hearing, and we'll move on to 20-3220. Madam Clerk.
Thank you. An ordinance amending the code, Chapter 7, Traffic, Section 7-11, through streets, stop intersections and yield intersections, subsection 7-11.2, stop intersections designated.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councilmember Hairston.
Thank you, Council President. Now we're moving to the ordinance that is a result of the paving on Wallace Road to meet ADA requirements, and barrier-free ramps were installed at that intersection of Rose Lane and Wallace Road. And though a crosswalk exists there, it was not striped. So in an effort to increase pedestrian safety, and as a result of vehicular pedestrian traffic in the vicinity, the decision was to make a stripe on the crosswalk, which increases the need for a stop sign at this location. And so I move to open the hearing for this ordinance.
We need a second.
Press your space bar, Councilwoman.
You muted.
Space bar wasn't working. Sorry. Second.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments from members of council on this this ordinance? Councilmember Naidoo.
I just want to thank DCS overall for all the work that they've done down at Wallace Road. A few years ago, when I joined council, and maybe many of the folks on council right now were there as well. Folks from Wallace Road came to council to point out that they had issues that had been going on for 30 years. We have addressed, I believe, many of those issues, including the flooding issue. Actually, our city engineer recently reported to the CAP committee about the recent storm that we had the other night that had significant impact on many places around town because of the amount of water that fell in a very short period of time. But one of the places that managed that water well was Wallace Road. And that would not have happened a few years ago. I'm almost positive of that. So for all the improvements down in Wallace Road, thank the DCS staff for what they've done.
Thank you, Councilmember Naidoo. That's great news. I'm really glad to hear that, because that storm was quite significant and there were a lot of problems. So it's nice to hear that Wallace Road has been addressed. So thank you. Any other comments from members of council? Any comments from members of the public on this ordinance? Okay, so hearing no comments, I'm going to close this hearing and we'll move on to the last of our ordinances for hearing, capital projects. Madam Clerk, could you read that ordinance title, please?
Number 20-3221, an ordinance authorizing the public bidding to lease the building located on block 2706, lot 4, on the tax map of the city of Summit.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councilmember Little.
Thank you, Council President. This ordinance would allow the city to engage in public bidding for a lease agent for the property at 7 Cedar Street. This would allow the lease agent to negotiate on behalf of the city to fill any vacancies in that building that arise while the city owns it. Currently, there are 2. If we weren't to do this, we would have to put out to public bid every time there's a vacancy, and obviously that would be a delay. So this would streamline the process, allow us to go to public bidding for the leasing agent, who could then negotiate on behalf of the city to fill those vacancies. And I ask that we open the hearing on this matter.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Little. Are there any comments from members of council? Any comments from members of the public on this topic? Okay, once again, I'll ask for members of council. Okay, seeing none, we're going to close this hearing, and now we'll move on to ordinances for final consideration. Madam Clerk, could you read the first finance ordinance, please?
Yes. 20-3213, bond ordinance appropriating $4,225,000, authorizing the issuance of $4,023,000 in bonds or notes of the city for various improvements or purposes authorized to be undertaken by the city of Summit, Union County, New Jersey.
Councilmember Vartan.
Thank you, Council President. This bond ordinance allowing for the appropriation and issuance of bonds for the capital improvements and equipment was the topic of the hearing earlier. I move to adopt this ordinance.
Councilmember Bowman, we need a second.
Second.
Okay, roll call, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Hairston?
Aye.
Ms. Little?
Aye.
Mr. Naidoo?
Aye.
Mr. O'Sullivan?
Aye.
Mr. Vartan?
Aye.
President Fox?
Aye. Okay, the motion carries. So moving on to finance number 2, Madam Clerk, could you please read the title?
20-3214, ordinance providing for the improvement of the Broad Street parking garage in and by the city of Summit, County of Union, New Jersey, parking utility, and appropriating $380,000 therefore for the parking utility capital from the parking utility capital improvement fund of the city.
Councilmember Vartan.
Thank you, Council President. This ordinance allowing the appropriation of money for the Broad Street garage repairs, not borrowing the money, but just appropriating the money, was the topic of the hearing earlier. I move to adopt this ordinance.
Second.
Okay, roll call, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Hairston?
Aye.
Ms. Little?
Aye.
Mr. Naidu?
Aye.
Mr. O'Sullivan?
Aye.
Mr. Vartan?
Aye.
President Fox?
Aye. Okay, the motion carries. Moving on to finance number 3. Madam Clerk, could you please read the title?
20-3215, bond ordinance appropriating $710,000 and authorizing issuance of $710,000 in bonds or notes of the city for various sewer utility improvements or purposes authorized to be undertaken by the city of Summit, Union County, New Jersey.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councilmember Vartan.
Thank you, Council President. This bond ordinance allowing for the appropriation and issuance of bonds for the sewer utility capital improvement projects and equipment was the topic of the hearing earlier. I move to adopt this ordinance.
Second.
Can we please have a roll call vote, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Hairston?
Aye.
Ms. Little?
Aye.
Mr. Naidu?
Aye.
Mr. O'Sullivan?
Aye.
Mr. Vartan?
Aye.
President Fox?
Aye. Okay, motion carries. Moving on. The last of the finance ordinances. Madam Clerk, could you please read the title?
20-3216, an ordinance to establish the 2020 salaries, wages, or compensations and for the officers and employees of the city of Summit, County of Union, New Jersey.
Councilmember Vartan.
Thank you, Council President. This ordinance is establishing the 2020 salaries for all union and non-union employees of the city of Summit was the topic of the hearing earlier. I move to adopt this ordinance.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Hairston?
Aye.
Ms. Little?
Aye.
Mr. Naidu?
Aye.
Mr. O'Sullivan?
Aye.
Mr. Vartan?
Aye.
President Fox?
Aye. The motion carries. Moving on to safety and health. Could you please read the first title, Madam Clerk?
Yes, 20-3217, an ordinance amending Chapter 7 Traffic, Section 7-8 Parking, subsection 7-8.5 Parking Time Limited on Certain Streets, and subsection 7-8.7 Parking Prohibited at All Times on Certain Streets of the Code of the City of Summit.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councilmember Hairston.
Thank you, Madam Council President. This ordinance, which is for parking on Waldron Avenue, to change the time to 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and to restrict it to parking on one side of the street. I was the topic of the earlier hearing, and I move this ordinance.
I second.
Thank you. Could we have a roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Hairston?
Aye.
Ms. Little?
Aye.
Mr. Naidu?
Aye.
Mr. O'Sullivan?
Aye.
Mr. Vartan?
Aye.
President Fox?
Aye. Okay, motion carries. Moving on to safety and health number 2, Madam Clerk.
Number 20-3218, an ordinance amending the code, Chapter 7 Traffic, Section 7-11.2, stop intersections designated.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councilmember Hairston.
Thank you, Council President Fox. This ordinance to install 4-way stop signs at the intersections of Ashland and Tulip, Ashland and Maple, and Tulip and Prospect was the topic of the previous hearing. And I ask that we move this for approval.
I second.
Okay, could we have a roll call vote, Madam Clerk?
Yes,
please?
Mr. Bowman,
Nay.
Ms. Hairston,
Aye.
Ms. Little,
Aye.
Mr. Naidu,
Aye.
Mr. O'Sullivan,
Aye.
Mr. Vartan,
Aye.
President Fox.
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to the third Safety and Health Ordinance. Madam Clerk, could you read the title, please?
Yes, 20-3218. An ordinance amending the code, Chapter 7, Traffic, Section -11.2, stop intersections designated.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councilmember Hairston.
Pardon me, are we doing 3218 or 3219?
19.
Did we just take the vote on 18? I'm sorry. Yes, I apologize. That we took the vote on 3218 just now. I'll read 3219 if I may.
Sure.
Thank you. 20-3219, an ordinance amending the code, Chapter 7, Traffic, Section 7-11, through streets, stop intersections, and yield intersections, subsection 7-11.2, stop intersections designated.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councilmember Hairston.
Thank you, Council President Fox. This ordinance, which was designating a stop intersection at Cleveland and Windsor, and will install stop signs on Cleveland Road, was the topic of the previous hearing, and I move this ordinance for approval.
I second.
Thank you. Could we have a roll call vote, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Hairston?
Aye.
Ms. Little?
Aye.
Mr. Naidu?
Aye.
Mr. O'Sullivan?
Aye.
Mr. Vartan?
Aye.
President Fox.
Aye. Okay, moving on to the last of these safety and health ordinances. Madam Clerk, 20
yes.
Yes, go ahead.
20-3220, an ordinance amending the code, Chapter 7, Traffic, Section 7-11, through streets, stop intersections, and yield intersections, and subsection 7-11.2, stop intersections designated.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councilmember Hairston.
Thank you, Council President Fox. This ordinance to designate a stop intersection at Rose Lane and Wallace Road, and the stop signs will be installed on Rose Lane, was the topic of the previous hearing, and I move it forward for approval.
Councilmember Little.
And I second.
Okay, thank you. Could we have a roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Hairston?
Aye.
Ms. Little?
Aye.
Mr. Naidu?
Aye.
Mr. O'Sullivan?
Aye.
Mr. Vartan?
Aye.
President Fox.
Aye. Okay, the motion carries. And now our last ordinance for final consideration, capital projects. Madam Clerk, could you please read the title?
20-3221, an ordinance authorizing the public bidding to lease the building located on block 2706, lot 4, on the tax map of the city of Summit.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And Councilmember Little.
Thank you, Council President. This ordinance, as we just discussed in the hearing, is to allow the city to put out to bid for a leasing agent for the property that we own at 7 Cedar Street. And I ask that we approve this ordinance.
Second.
Okay, could we have a roll call vote, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Hairston?
Aye.
Ms. Little?
Aye.
Mr. Naidu?
Aye.
Mr. O'Sullivan?
Aye.
Mr. Vartan?
Aye.
President Fox.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, at long last, we're moving on to resolutions. So first, I'll call for any comments. We have 4 capital projects and community services resolutions. Is there any member of the public who has comments on any of those 4 resolutions? Okay, Seeing up. Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Kelly. I think is she mute? I think you. Let's see. Can you unmute yourself?
It looks like she's, there you go.
Can you hear me now? Sorry about that.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Hi, good evening. Eileen Kelly at 47 Woodland Avenue. My questions are on when we can expect the next public workshop to be held on the Broad Street West redevelopment project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question. At this point, we are in the we are starting the negotiation, or we are in the negotiation process with the redevelopers. And when we have a proposal to present to the public for comment, that will be when you can expect another public procedure or public hearing of sorts. Do you have a sense, Mr. Rogers, when that might be?
I think given where we are in our discussions with the redeveloper, I would say the fall at some point would be a good time frame that we would be presenting something to the public just to reflect our discussions and the terms that we are negotiating at this time. So I would hope that by the fall at some point we would be. There's no precise, just because the negotiation will go as it goes, and it could be sooner, but that's my my sense at this point.
Thank you for that. Mayor Adist. You're muted again.
I have so much back noise. Eileen, one of the reasons that we chose to work with these developers was because they were so interested in being involved in the community, but they wanted to make sure that we did it at the right time and most efficiently and effectively. So they are anxious to have conversations with the community. Obviously, this whole pandemic has changed things a bit, and certainly skewed the timeline. But the fall is definitely a time when we'll have some information, and they certainly want to be engaged with the community. That's their style. That's one of the reasons we chose them.
That's a very good point. Thank you for elaborating. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to call on Councilmember Little to get started with the first of the capital projects resolutions.
Thank you, Council President. Capital Projects Resolution number 1 is number 7251, and this is a resolution to authorize the execution of an access agreement between the City of Summit and Broad Street West Managers, LLC, in connection with the redevelopment of the Broad Street West redevelopment area. As those of you who have been following along know, that the city entered into a resolution that designated Broad Street West Managers as the conditional redeveloper for the project site of Broad Street West. This agreement allows the developers access to publicly owned parcels within the area that they would potentially be acquiring as part of the redevelopment. So that allows them to do some limited due diligence on those properties and gather information so that we can go forward with the negotiations on the redevelopment. And I ask that we approve this resolution.
I second it.
Any comments from members of council? Councilmember Naidu.
Thank you, Council President. I guess this is in some ways my thoughts about redevelopment and where we are in response to Ms. Kelly's question as well. And that is that, as the mayor said, the developers and the city administrator said, the developers are interested in having conversations with us, to having public discussions. We're entering a negotiation phase, and some of that requires just having stuff being done behind the scenes and having discussions with them. And there is reasons why we need to be very thoughtful and mindful, which we will be, about when to have discussions out in the public about it and think through things. There are multiple issues that need to be discussed through, including about uses, densities, things like that. And rather than go rushing off to having discussions with the public about what it is, we need to first do the going through a detailed, thoughtful process with the developers. There's multiple people who are involved in these discussions, both from the planning board side, from council side, the mayor, city staff. These are, and as well as our planners. There's lots of stuff to be going on. And we've had multiple discussions with the public. We have a sense from the public over 2 years. We've had discussions previously with the public concerning what the public would like to see in that area. So we have a pretty good sense of what the community would want us to do there. Now comes the hard part of trying to negotiate and see where we are. And while I appreciate Ms. Kelly's interest in finding out more information, we also have to recognize that this is really serious stuff about what we're doing, because there's money issues involved. There's what the city will look like in the long term. We just don't race through it because people want to get more information. At least that's my perspective. We're going to do this, and we're going to try to do this right, which I believe we will. But it's going to take some time, and we have to be mindful that we as a city don't necessarily need redevelopment in order to spur economic development or something that other cities may need. We need to do this in order that it benefits the residents of Summit.
Thank you, Councilmember Naidu. Are there any other comments? Okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? The motion carries. Moving on, resolution number 2, Councilmember Little.
Thank you, Council President. Capital Projects Resolution number 2 is number 7257. And this is to authorize some 2020 Earth Day activity, in particular cleanup of Martinsbrook by the Summit Boy Scouts. As you all are aware, the Earth Day activities were significantly curtailed this year due to the COVID pandemic, and were limited to individual residents doing activities on their own. However, the Summit Boy Scouts were very interested in doing a more organized cleanup, and they have requested that they be allowed to do a cleanup in Martinsbrook with social distancing on Saturday, September 12th, with a rain date of September 13th of this year. And I ask that we approve this resolution.
I second it.
Thank you, Councilmember Little. Any comments from members of council? Okay. I think I would like to thank the Boy Scouts for doing this. I think it's great that they're willing to get out there and plan this. You know, I think this was unfortunate that in April we were not able to safely do the Earth Day cleanup. It's been 14 years that we've done this, and this will be the first year that we've missed. So it's nice that the Boy Scouts are picking up the mantle and doing this in the fall, and I hope that we'll have more opportunities to do some cleanup work in the fall. So with that, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Capital Projects number 3.
Thank you, Council President. Capital Projects number 3 is number 7266, which is to authorize execution of an agreement with Union County to modify the cooperative agreement as dated June 17th, 2014. This is something that we do every year to modify an agreement with the county to enable the city to access community development block grants through the county. Usually these are applied for through the Housing Authority, but they will allow us to participate in this program. And I ask that we approve this resolution.
I second it.
Any comments from members of council? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Final Capital Projects number 4. Councilmember Little.
Thank you, Council President. The final capital projects resolution is number 7291, and that's to appoint Anna Estupinan. I sincerely hope I got the pronunciation correct, to be a member of our Recycling Advisory Committee. She is a Summit High School student, and she is filling the role of high school student on that board. We've heard great things about Anna, and we would welcome her advice and thoughtfulness on this committee. So I ask that we approve this resolution.
I second it.
Any comments from members of council? Councilmember Vartan.
Just a very quick plug for applying to volunteer for the city. You know, this is one of the groups that has a high school spot, but some of them don't specify that it needs to be a high school spot. It just is a resident. So if you are a young person who would like to become involved more in the city, I would encourage you to apply and do that. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from members of council? Okay, so with that, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Welcome, Anna. And now we're moving on to 3 community programs and parking services resolutions. Councilmember O'Sullivan, would you like to start with number 1?
Yes. Thank you, Council President. This is ID number 7264 to authorize the inclusion of GRACE in the city's insurance coverage. For those that don't know, GRACE is a volunteer nonprofit that helps local families in need by supplying fresh food, toiletries, and household goods. On average, GRACE provides assistance to approximately 120 families during normal times. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the number of families that GRACE is serving per week has grown to over 500 families, of which the vast majority are from Summit. The volunteer work that GRACE is doing is in the best interests of the city of Summit and our citizens. For all GRACE has done for this city, now we have a chance to do something for GRACE. Their insurance comes through the Junior League, and our Director of Community Programs, Marco Zarowski, advises that their coverage is set to expire. In order to assist GRACE in serving our city, this resolution would add GRACE onto the city's insurance. This request to have coverage through the city insurance will be much like the coverage for Trican and the Senior Connection Bus, which are both affiliated nonprofits of the Department of Community Programs. GRACE is governed by its own board of trustees and will otherwise remain financially independent from the city. The additional insurance cost to include GRACE would be about $500 per year. I move this resolution.
I enthusiastically second.
So thank you. I think this is a great addition to the city family in the sense that we have been partnering with GRACE. They use Cornog Fieldhouse. They have facilities also at the community center to serve our seniors down there, and also I think our Trican population. So there has been a partnership all this time, and I think this makes a lot of sense. It's a very minimal cost to add them to our insurance. It also makes sure that they have coverage that protects the city as well, since they're using our spaces. And they have, you know, the services that GRACE has provided, particularly in the past 4 months, are incredible. I mean, the idea that they could go from serving under 100 families a week to over 500, and they've done it with, you know, no matter how many people show up, they always manage to have enough food for everyone. And, you know, in this time when there's so much food insecurity, I think we have a lot to be thankful for that GRACE is in our community. So I fully support this. Does anyone else have anything that they'd like to say? Okay, and I realized that I did not ask for comments from members of the public on the on the community programs resolutions. So I'll open it up if there's anyone from the public who'd like to comment on any of these resolutions. Okay, so seeing none, any other comments from council? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Community programs number 2, Councilmember O'Sullivan.
Thank you, Council President. This is ID number 7244 to establish Silver Summit Senior Citizens Advisory Board. Mayor Radis has said many times that Summit's best asset is its people. During this pandemic, we have seen our citizens rise to the occasion by volunteering their time and countless other resources like never before. This resolution seeks to bring together the various nonprofits and other volunteer organizations that are doing great work within our community for Summit's senior citizen population in a more collaborative and efficient way. As discussed in closed session, to lead this new committee, we are appointing Tracy Keegan to serve as chair of Silver Summit. She will also serve this committee as the Shield representative. Tracy is a longtime Summit resident who volunteers her talents and time in countless ways and has the organizational ability and institutional know-how to bring together these various organizations in a strategic way. We are fortunate to have someone like her among our citizens. The committee will be comprised of 2 senior citizens from the community at large, and those were named as discussed in closed session, Laura O'Rourke and Linda Ross. Also, as discussed in closed session, Mayor Radis will join this committee. 2 council members will join this committee, the DCP director, and a representative from each of the following: Housing Authority board member, Grace, Sage Elder Care, the Summit Area YMCA, The Connection, Summit Interfaith Council. These organizations on their own do amazing work for our seniors. This committee only wants to build on their efforts by encouraging communication to enhance collaboration and eliminate gaps and duplicative efforts in services provided. We are oversubscribed with volunteers, and we need this committee to harness their generous spirit so that we can have a more effective and coordinated impact on our senior citizens' lives. I move this resolution.
I second.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Sullivan. I think you did a really great job of explaining the mission of this committee. Another thing that we would like to have this committee work on, we have a number of volunteers, and one thing that we found during the first wave of the pandemic was that there were a number of seniors who their social network was somewhat limited. You know, they were isolated because perhaps they couldn't see family members. People who would normally come in to help them were not able to. And we'd like to set up a voluntary program through this committee where any senior who would like to be added to the list can sign up to receive a call from a volunteer from this committee. Just a check-in social call, or also an ability to ask if there's a particular need that they have. It's a way that we can connect people with services and help make sure that no one falls through the cracks, particularly in this time when we are social distancing and when it is so hard to connect with one another. So I think this, I really look forward to working to build this committee. I think it's going to be a really great asset for our Summit residents. So I'm fully supportive of this, and I'll ask now if there are any comments or issues from any other members of council. Councilmember Little.
Thank you, Council President. As the liaison to the Housing Authority, which includes our senior housing, I've been met a lot of people that are in this group that maybe have different needs than the rest of the residents. I think this is a really valuable committee that's going to be able to advise council on all kinds of issues. And I think the COVID epidemic brought to the forefront the need for this, but the needs were there all along. And I think that this committee will be really valuable to council going forward, even after this crisis is over. And I think this is a great step that we're doing that will allow us to really address the needs of a very valuable part of our community.
Thank you, Councilmember Little. Anyone else have any comments? Any comments from members of the public? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? With that, the motion carries. So we have one last resolution, Councilmember O'Sullivan.
Thank you, Council President. This is ID number 7265 to authorize valet contract suspension with Parking Services Plus from August 1st, 2020 to October 31st, 2020. On April 24th, we passed a resolution from the floor suspending our valet contract with Parking Services Plus for May, June, and July. This 3-month suspension was due to the impact of COVID-19 that led to people working from home and not commuting nearly as much. During that council meeting, we said that the contract may be suspended beyond July. And as we sit here today, many New York City businesses are still not up and running and commuters are still working from home. Our parking garage is being underutilized, and therefore it makes sense to once again suspend our contract with Parking Services Plus for an additional 3 months from August 1st, 2020 to October 31st, 2020. These 2 3-month suspensions have now moved the expiration date of the original contract to June 30th, 2021, at a total savings of $67,485.50. Parking Services Plus has been a good partner with the city, and these suspensions give us flexibility and save us from voiding our agreement and going out to bid again. If we see that parking demand is increasing and the need arises to bring Parking Services Plus back online, the city will provide 2 weeks' notice as to the restart date. I move this resolution.
Second.
Any comments from members of council? Any comments from members of the public? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. So we're moving on now to the consent agenda. So usually we take the consent agenda as a whole unless there is anyone from council or from a member of the public who has comments on any of the consent agenda items. Is there anyone who has a comment on any individual item? Okay, seeing none, we'll move. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as a whole?
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, now on to council members' comments and new business. Are there any council members who wish to be recognized? Okay, I'm seeing nobody. So with that, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that's it. We're adjourned. Have a good evening, everybody, and thank you all. Stay safe, be well. Take care.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.